So welcome back, everyone. My next guest has been on with me many times. I have with me Bob Howard, and he's with the law offices of Stewart M Lane. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Carol. Nice to see you again.
The last time you were on, we had a caller that called in with a very interesting question, and you thought, well, since somebody was thinking about that, you thought we would talk about it. Let's talk about what you wanted to talk about.
Pension plans. There's three very common assets that we divide up in a divorce. It's usually a house, the cars, and the pension plan. And there's a lot of myths about pension plans, a lot of lack of knowledge. So I thought today we'd talk about pension plans.
It's a great conversation. It was a great question. And here's what we're doing. We're opening up the lines for you all to be able to call in, get a little advice here. Our number here is 602-277-5369. Toll free, it's 1-866-536-1100. They have 4 offices throughout the valley, and they do free consultations with everyone. They also have Scott David Stewart's book that he wrote. It's the Arizona Divorce Handbook, your step-by-step guide to navigating an Arizona divorce. I love this book. Yeah, I got divorced in Arizona, and I wish I had it because it really has so much information. It's easy to read, and it's great for everybody. We're going to give that to everyone, too, that calls in, again, with a question or not. We want everybody to get educated and get this book. Our number here is 602-277-5369. Toll free, it's 1-866-536-1100. Are all pension plans the same?
No, there's a whole lot of different varieties. I mean, you know of IRAs and you've heard of 401ks, but there's defined benefit plans, defined contribution plans, private plans, public plans, Social Security. There's a whole lot of different things.
Who knew there were so many plans?
I know. There's so many things that are covered by pension plans, and each one has a little bit different variation, a little bit different rules. So it's really important to know what kind of plan you have before you start trying to divide it up or put a value on it.
So does it really make a difference when it's a divorce?
Well, absolutely, because there are so many different types of plans. If you think the plan is worth one amount and it turns out it's worth a lot more and you don't figure that out till later, it's already been divided. You're not going to be treated fairly. So before you start the negotiation, you need to understand exactly what type of plan you have, and then understand how that plan can be valued, and then also understand how we're going to divide it up.
Now, the caller that called in, I'm going to go back to that for a minute.
Sure.
I can't remember what, I'm sure you do, what that was, because, you know, one of the things that you said that a lot of people don't realize so many things with this, and they think they know, and when they find out, they kind of get a little bit upset. Go ahead.
Well, I think he had a defined benefit plan, as a matter of fact. So what's a defined benefit plan? That's the type of plan where they agree, or your employer agrees, to pay you a certain amount of money for life. It's like an annuity. So there's a formula set up that says if you work for us for X number of years, when you retire, we'll take your average monthly wage for the last 5 years you worked for us, and we'll give you 70% of that till you die. And then they buy an annuity that will pay out that amount, and the payments continue. Now, a lot of times it'll also be what's called a joint survivor annuity. In other words, it'll pay out until the survivor of the husband and wife dies. Sometimes you have a choice. You can choose a single survivor annuity. It'll only pay out until the employee dies, in which case you get a little bit more per month, but it stops when the first one dies, or it stops when the employed spouse dies. So actually, I believe a lot of federally qualified plans require the employee to get the wife's permission if he wants to take the single survivor plan. This protects the wife, so they may get a little bit less per month, but it'll keep paying out after the worker dies and the surviving spouse continues to live. So that's one type of plan. The other more common type of plan is defined contribution plan. 401k plans are defined contribution plans. You make a contribution each month, the employer maybe matches some of that, and then it's invested in a mutual fund or stocks or something. So any given day, the difference here is with a 401k or a defined contribution plan, you can calculate what it's worth. With a defined benefit plan, if you're 10 years from retirement, how do we put a value on that? You know, we don't know how long you're going to live. We don't know what kind of employment you're going to have. We don't know what you're going to be earning during those last 3 years. Now, one way of doing that, you can hire an actuary. and they'll make some guesses as to how long you're going to live based on mortality tables and rates of return and how much you're earning right now. And what I've kind of found out is that if we hire 5 actuaries, we'll get 5 different numbers.
Yeah, how does anyone know? That's like crystal ball there, right?
Yeah, so that makes a big difference. It's pretty easy to value a 401k, but defining or valuing a defined benefit plan is much more difficult. So we do different things to divide them up.
But this was the big question, because people, when they're having a divorce, and especially if it's a little bit of a nasty divorce, they want to know how much that person's going to get and how long they're going to get it. And that was the key. That was the kicker. How long is she going to get it? And what was the answer? I think it was like forever.
Yeah, the answer was
there
forever.
You go,
he had a
guys.
defined benefit plan, and she was going to get her portion of the plan forever. So the general rules with pension plans is that anything earned during the marriage and contributed to the plan is community property. And anything put in a plan prior to the marriage or after the marriage is over is separate property. You get to keep your separate property portion of the plan, but the community portion of the plan is going to be divided equally between the parties. So with a 401k, that's pretty easy. We look back to the date when the party got married, how much they put in the plan while married, what's that worth today? Let's divide it up 50-50. Well, it's a little bit more difficult with a defined benefit plan. We do something, now we're going to get into the math, folks. The fractional share formula. Sounds tough, doesn't it? Basically, what we do is we say how many years were you in the plan and how many years were you in the plan and married. So the fractional share formula, the numerator is number of years in the plan and married. Denominator, total years in the plan. So let's do the math real easy. Let's say you're married for 10 years and in the plan, you get divorced, keep working in the plan for 10 more years. So total years in the plan is 20. Number of years married in the plan is 10. 10 20ths, 50%. 50% of the monthly payment is community property. Each spouse gets half the community property. So the non-working spouse will get 25% of the monthly benefit, and the working spouse will get 75% of the monthly benefit under the fractional share formula. And that's how we usually define benefit plans.
Well, it's a lot of information, a lot of math.
Yeah, exactly.
And our number here is 602-277-5369. Toll free, it's 1-866-536-1100. You should check them out. They are at ArizonaLawGroup.com. They do free consultations with everyone. 4 offices throughout the valley. Their phone number is 602-548-4600. And you can also call here, and if you have any questions, he's here to answer them live for you and to help you out with some of the questions and get some free advice right here. 602-277-5369. Toll free, it's 1-866-536-1100. And it could be anything. It doesn't have to be about this, but right now it's open to everything, okay? So, what about taxes?
You have a bunch of options when you divide up a plan during a marriage. If it's a 401k and you want to take the money out immediately, depending on your age, you will be taxed on the proceeds. If you're under 59 and a half, you'll also be taxed an extra 10% as a penalty. So if you want to take the money, if you absolutely need it, and you're willing to pay the tax penalties and the taxes, when you divide up a 401k, the non-working spouse can take out their money and spend it any way they like. But if they don't want to be taxed, they can roll it over. We do that doing a quadro. QDRO, Qualified Domestic Relations Orders. That's what we call them on this side of the Mississippi. As I understand, the eastern side, they call them QDROs. No idea why.
You say tomato, I say tomato.
Exactly. So if you prepare a quadro, you can roll your money over into an IRA. And an IRA is a non-taxable event. And keep it in the IRA until after 59 and a half, you avoid the 10% penalty. Keep it until you're 70 or whatever, you just pay your ordinary income taxes when you start pulling it out. Obviously, RMDs, required minimum distributions after 70, but just like any other IRA, that's how you divide up a 401k or a defined contribution plan. You do a quadro. We also can use the quadro to do the defined benefit plans. that's where we use that fractional share formula.
Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to a break. When we come back, we're going to talk further about this. Our lines are open. Everyone's getting the Arizona Divorce Handbook. It's your step-by-step guide to navigating an Arizona divorce by Scott David Stewart. Everyone's going to get that. You can also call in. You can ask questions, get some free advice. Our number here is 602-277-5369. Check them out at ArizonaLawGroup.com. We'll be back in just a minute. So welcome back. We are talking with Bob Howard, and he is with the law offices of Stewart M Lane. Our lines are open here, and you can call in. Anyone who's called in and you want to call back, you can. Again, our number here is 602-277-5369. Toll free, it's 1-866-536-1100. Bob, I love the way that you talk. I love that it's so you can understand it for everybody. And you said that you really want to do that. You all are about educating. That's why you'd like to come on the show.
Exactly. I mean, there's so many myths and misconceptions about family law, and it's tough enough going through a divorce without having all those problems. So you really need to be able to communicate with your client, and I'd urge people to interview with 2 or 3 attorneys. Find somebody that's a good mix. You're going to have to be working with them for 6 months to maybe a year or more, and if they can't communicate with you, it's going to be a long, hard relationship.
Well, they're all about education, and everyone's going to get the book, the Arizona Divorce Handbook. It's your step-by-step guide to navigating a divorce. It doesn't matter when you get in a divorce. If you're thinking about it, if you've been, you know it's going to come up. Something's going to come up. It always comes up. And so we want everybody to get that. And you can call in. You can ask questions, anything about divorce, even though today we're talking pension plans. But that was because somebody happened to bring it up. We have our lines open here at 602-277-5369. Toll free, it's 1-866-536-1100. Okay, let's go back to what we were talking about, which was the tax part of that, and the quadros or the kudros or whatever those are.
And another common misconception is that you have to do a quadro to divide up an IRA. And by the way, there's a whole series of attorneys out there who pretty much are boutique practitioners. They only prepare quadros. They do enough of them that they can do them at a volume, and of course we know the 4 or 5 really good ones in town, and that's who we usually associate with when a quadro is needed. But one of the popular misconceptions is you need a quadro to divide up an IRA, and you don't actually. You just need a certified copy of the court order. So we divide up IRAs all the time. And again, you can roll the IRA over into another IRA and there's no tax consequences, or you can take out the money, as long as you're willing to pay the taxes, then you will have a tax consequence. You don't want to do this on your own. You want to get a qualified professional, because if you do it wrong, suddenly you've got this tax bill that you weren't anticipating.
That's bringing up a really good point about all of this, because so many people try and do things online nowadays, because they think that they think they're telling that everything they hear online is the truth, right?
Exactly. So you want to be real careful about that. One of the biggest mistakes I've seen made has to do with a lot of people are teachers, or they work for the government, so they have the Arizona State Retirement Fund. Now this is a public pension plan versus a private pension plan. It is a defined benefit plan, and typically on your statement from the government you'll see this number that you contributed to the plan, and a lot of people mistake that number for being the value of the plan. It's not the value of the plan. It's way less than the value of the plan, because this is going to be a plan. It's going to pay out for your lifetime. Think about that. $300, $400, $500 a month for 20, 30 years. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But I have seen people make the mistake. The employed spouse tells the other one, oh, here's the value of my plan. I'll write you a check for half of it and you're paid off. Oh, so much money left on the table. So be very careful when dividing up, especially an Arizona State Retirement Fund. That's a defined benefit plan. You want to do the fractional share formula to be fair, or hire the actuary and let him take a responsible guess. It'll be a lot more than the value that the state is showing you that you contributed.
Hire an attorney.
Hire an attorney to get knowledgeable about it.
Yeah, and they do free consultations. They have 4 offices throughout the valley. Their phone number is 602-548-4600, and that website is ArizonaLawGroup.com. ArizonaDivorceHandbook.com. The book is called The Arizona Divorce Handbook, your step-by-step guide to navigating an Arizona divorce. Our number here is 602-277-5369. Toll free, it's 1-866-536-1100. We have a few more minutes where you can get some free advice right here on Networking Arizona. Okay, so we kind of went into some of those things. I wanted to say, should somebody trade their claim in the pension? What does that mean?
Well, frequently you have a situation where there's money in the bank, and let's say there's $100,000 in the bank and $100,000 in the 401k, and the party says, well, you take the bank, I'll take the 401k. Sounds fair, right? $100,000 each. Big mistake. That $100,000 in the 401k, when you pull it out, you're going to pay taxes on it. Might only be worth $80,000. $100,000 in the bank, you've already paid your taxes on it. So if you make that kind of a trade, you're leaving money on the table. The fair way to do it, half the pension plan, half the cash. Then each party has the same tax consequences. So you got to be careful if you're trading apples for apples or apples for oranges.
Well, I'll tell you something. When it comes to divorce, especially when someone's got things like pensions,
Exactly.
for the 401ks, the everything, all of these, it gets sticky.
It does. Well, and there's so common situation where people will have a 401k, they've been contributing to it for 10 years, and then they get married. And then they contribute it for another 10 years, and then there's a divorce. Well, what portion was the separate, and what portion was the community? Okay, here's a little tax tip, people. If you don't want to do a prenuptial agreement, when you get married, be sure you save that statement showing how much the plan was worth. If your plan has enough different options as far as investments, and you're in plans A, B, and C, think about switching your investments to plans D, E, and F. Because then you'll always know what was in A, B, and C is your separate property from before marriage. And when it grows, because the stock market hopefully goes up, we'll know that the original contribution plus the growth is your separate property versus the stuff you put in afterwards. Now, you know, ideally, if you could go to your employer and say, hey, everything I contribute from here on out, I want that in a separate account. But most employers aren't set up to do that. And some employers only have 2 or 3 options. So you're commingling. Well, okay, now you need to start saving all your statements, at least all your quarterly statements, your annual statements, and then you'll be able to prove what your separate property portion is, because the burden is on the party who wants to keep the separate property. Otherwise, they assume it's all community because it's been commingled, but you didn't have much option, did you, when you started making contributions to the 401k? You had to go mingle it.
I don't think that people think about these things, especially when they first start working, when they're beginning in their marriage,
Right.
And all this time. They don't even think about it. I bet you they probably forget
They don't.
about that.
And they think, oh, how unromantic, you know, that you're keeping separate property on the possibility there might be a divorce. Well, it's not just romance. What happens if the other party has a bad night, runs over somebody, big personal injury judgment against the community? If you've kept some of your property as separate property, that's not going to be responsible for the debts of the community. So it's a financial planning move, too, to maintain the separate property character of some of your assets.
For people that are listening to this that maybe even already have, you know, they're thinking like down the line they're thinking about getting a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, will you do a consultation with
sure.
them?
Yeah.
Obviously, but what I'm saying is that will you help them make those decisions? In other words, it's not just about doing it for them, but helping them again make some decisions together with them. Go ahead.
Right, exactly, and what they want to do and the kind of documentation they're going to need. So many people just don't realize that they need to save some of those statements. They just look at them and toss them in the trash. And then trying to recreate these things 10 and 15 years after the fact, or after the company has changed hands 3 times and they've got a new plan administrator or they switch benefits, it can be very hard to get old documentation. So you know, when you get married, if you're already in a plan, that's an important time to be saving some of those documents.
Right, and I was just going to say, so many people get married a second time. They've been working for a long time on their own. Maybe it's a good idea to talk to someone to get some ideas about what you want to do, because maybe you do want to do a prenup in that way.
Exactly. You know, there's lots of different reasons for doing prenups, and especially when there's a second marriage and you've got kids by the first marriage and you want to preserve their inheritance, maybe a prenup is in order.
Well, it's been a fun conversation, and you know what? It's interesting, and so many people out there, they don't realize that these things, you don't even think about it, and all you think about is who's going to get the money, because, right? Isn't that what happens?
Yeah.
But it's important for everybody to know that there's several things that you can do. They have 4 offices throughout the Valley. They do free consultations. Their number is 602-548-4600. It's ArizonaLawGroup.com. Keep on calling, guys, because we're going to get you the book. We want you to get you informed. 602-277-5369.